we're talking today about goal setting and how to do it. And it is reminding me that one of my huge goals for 2024 when it comes to my professional life is to be less frazzled and have more time to actually think and be strategic and not run around like a chicken with my head cut off. And it's interesting. Yesterday I was at a conference for women in finance, and very senior women were, one of them said, it's not a good look if you're trying to grow your career in an organization to always be so busy that you're like a chicken with its head cut off. It doesn't feel strategic, and people don't look at you as maybe a leader they want. I thought that was really interesting. And it reminded me that almost everyone I know right now, we're so overscheduled that we are a bit like chickens with our head cut off. So just throwing that out there.
How did that make you feel when you heard that advice?
Guilty.
Guilty.
You
You didn't feel like you didn't disagree with it.
I didn't at all. It made perfect sense. How do you think? What do you think?
I agree. It's just interesting how they were talking about the perception. I agree completely that if you're in a leadership position, you don't want to look as if you're not sure what's kind of urgent versus important. But we're all kind of, I guess, the duck kind of with the flapping under the water, right?
Right. And all of us are going to have that moment where Zoom hasn't updated.
Yeah. Yeah. And the funny thing about it is I feel like for myself, and I'm sure for a lot of people I work with, it's like, they can't see your intentions. Nobody can see that we're like, we want to be there on time. We want to, we had this whole thing prepared. I've been on so many situations where like the technology thing, just out of the blue. And, all I think about is they're going to leave this meeting thinking that he wasn't punctual or he wasn't, didn't take this as seriously. And it's so far from the truth.
It's so far. It's so far. So the only solution I have is to be open about it. Right.
Yes.
Okay. So goal setting, intention setting, reflections. It's sort of that time of the year for a lot of us. We're in sort of wrap up mode, but I think a lot of us are also, we're thinking ahead. And I wanted to talk about that and get your wisdom. And I guess first I wanted to ask you, what do you do to sort of feel like you're ending the year in a good place and that you have a direction for next year?
Okay, so one thing I'll confess, I am so not a planner, and
Really?
no, not at all. Like on the Myers-Briggs, I'm a P, INFP, and so we are like the wait and see, as opposed to the J. My wife is a J, thank God, and she's always planning for us.
I'm like a mega J.
Yeah, and the truth is that I've learned that there are benefits in being more planful. But I also know that like it creates anxiety for me. If I create a lot of routine and milestones and have to be very specific, because I kind of enjoy the meandering a little bit and exploring and questioning whether this is the right thing to do. But what I do like is reflecting. So I've always been somebody who is better at backward looking than future looking. It's one of the things that my wife always says, like, I have a really good memory, but it also can lead to a little bit of a lot of melancholy, a little bit of more of a depressive kind of streak, because I'm always kind of nostalgic. I'm always thinking about the past, and I'm not really great at being the optimism and the, wow, look what's possible next year.
That's what I love about you, though.
Really?
Well, I mean, the sort of like openness about this is how I tend.
Yeah, I'm like Eeyore, and my wife's like Tigger, but
That's funny.
but I have realized that like one of the things that I try to do is, because I'm more reflective, I've oftentimes told myself that, okay, you might not be good at predicting what's going to happen next year, but pretend like you're at the end of next year and you were reflecting on it again. And so if I put myself in that mindset, it actually plays a little bit better to how my mind operates. And then I'll start saying to myself, okay, let's reverse engineer what I want to really do.
Right.
And a little bit of that comes from maybe some skepticism that I oftentimes feel a little more pessimism that like, is this really going to happen? Even if I plan for it, I'm always like worried about the shoe's going to drop. So but I'm realizing that it's good to have some things in place, some goals in place.
That does bring up, right, if you're sort of an anxious person, does goal setting just create an ingredient of anxiety? But I think there's a difference also between goals and intentions, or sort of
Yeah.
broad brush. I'm definitely not, I'm not a like, I'm going to publish 10 articles. I'm going to do this by Q4. I'm not like that. For me, it's more, there's buckets of intention,
Hmm.
and that's where I want to go, because otherwise I'm too disorganized, I think.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
I don't have a,
I love that intention. That's a great point.
yeah, even if I have specific deadlines from clients or my book or whatever, to me, if the year doesn't have a direction, I feel kind of disorganized.
Hmm. Hmm. Do you have anything that you're particularly focused on for next year?
Well, for me, I like to make sure that I've taken stock. So maybe we could talk about reflecting
Yes,
first
let's do that.
before I set intentions, because it seems kind of silly, to not learn, and then maybe there's things that you want to react to or do things different.
For sure.
How do you close out your year, or
Yeah. So one thing that I do find is I'm terrible at taking vacations. This is something that actually is going to be a goal for me next year, particularly because I have a child now and I have to be much more cognizant of like their experiences. But I do find naturally the last couple of weeks of the year, I always am able to slow down because everybody else is slowing down. And in that time, I do find it's really magical to be able to sit with my thoughts, and I do look back a little bit on like what have I really done, that I'm proud of. What have I learned about myself?
Mhm.
Certainly, as an entrepreneur, every year I'm learning a lot about how this whole business works and like what my own kind of capacity to work for myself is. And so I think I try to reflect on what I'm proud of, but I oftentimes reflect on, what I didn't do,
Mhm.
and really try to tell myself, okay, is it still important to me? Is it still kind of aligned with my values? We do so much. I think you do this with your keynoting and working with leaders too. Like we're helping other people so much that I don't really spend a lot of time really taking those tools and putting them in front of myself.
No. What is it? The cobbler's child has no shoes?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right. So that's one thing. I mean, I have a worksheet that I give to all my clients at this time of the year, and it's kind of like I need to go through that myself as well.
What's on that worksheet?
Yeah. So essentially, it's the reflection and goal planning, goal setting, and it splits it into leadership, professional, and personal. So leadership, what am I proud of? Oh, and also challenges. So what am I proud of, and also what are the challenges that I really dealt with this year? Where did I kind of find some resilience, or where was I able to kind of surprise myself and being able to deal with it? Professionally, where was I able to get out of my comfort zone? And then personally, really, did I live up? What were my values? Because a lot of times I think I'm not always aware of what those are. And then, did I actually honor them? Did I kind of stay true to them?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
What's a challenge for you this year that you learned from?
Oh, I think it continues to be a challenge to decide when to say no to things. And not just work. It's like say no to commitments, say no to family, say no to, just expectations.
Mhm.
I would say that I'm still not great at it. I can tell that I work. Sometimes I do operate from a place of I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, or I want to please. I worry that I might lose the connection later if I need it. And that continues to be a goal that I'm going to have to set for next year too. I don't even really know how to measure it because again, I'm always kind of like receiving. I'm more reactive to like what's coming my way. But maybe that's an area where I need to be more proactive, is saying to myself, okay, this is all the things that I generally will have to be asked to do. And here's the percentage I'm going to say yes to. And then the rest, I'm just not going to feel guilty about it.
Or maybe it could even be more fluid than that. Like, just like, I'm just going to say no more. I'm just going to practice,
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I mean, it definitely, I need to practice that. It's scary when you say it, but it's, cause I'm
Well,
always thinking about there's degrees to which the need, is, but
it's funny you mentioned the sort of like anxiety and FOMO that you feel about saying no. I think that's common. Yesterday, I actually put this on my LinkedIn, but I was at a conference of senior women in finance. I just said that. And Stephanie Sanford, who's a partner at Goldman Sachs, um, said something so interesting about saying no. She said two things. She said, she was asked to be part of a process at Goldman, I guess, where they decide who's going to be MD, who's going to be partner. And she said, this is a huge deal. Obviously, it's about the future of the firm, all these things. It's like another job on top of your other job. Huge commitment. She was asked to do it, which of course is the kind of thing that is great to be asked.
Right.
You should do it. And she said, I had already done it. I had done it. And I said no, because I thought, I've done this. This is a great opportunity for someone else who's never done it.
Yeah.
And also I can't take on a new job right now. I have a new job that I need to focus on. And she said, it sort of turned the FOMO and anxiety of what will they think of me? Why I can't turn this down? This is will they question it into a like, oh, I'm actually giving an opportunity for growth for someone else, which I thought was really cool. And, she said, sometimes we have to make these decisions that we feel might lose us a piece of business or open up an opportunity for someone else to take something away from us, or all the scary things that we worry about. But we have to check in with our values and our other commitments, and ultimately make a hard choice and just sleep with it. Like, sorry, whoa, that came out wrong. But be able to sleep at night, she said. And I thought that was great, because I think that anxiety underpins a lot of our fear to say no.
Yes. Yeah. And such a great point too, because this is something I see a lot with leaders, where actually your job as you get up to that level, like she is, and other people at the C level and stuff, you really do want to start giving opportunities to other people more. I mean, it's less about you having to show what you can do.
Yeah.
But there's so many executives that their insecurity gets the better of them. And then they end up actually hoarding opportunities. They're not a leader that people want to follow, because people think, well, what's the point of, my potential if you're always going to do everything? And so it is a win-win the way she positioned it. I mean, she's able to kind of commit on things that she'd like to learn and maybe do more of, and also make those opportunities for other people. I love the idea also of Adam Grant, I think, had talked about this somewhere, where when he's asked like for requests, like, hey, can you speak at this, or can you do an interview? If he can't do it, he automatically will say, I can't, but like, here's somebody you should talk to.
Yeah.
So that's another opportunity to make a referral or an introduction. And then it takes a little bit of that maybe guilt off as well. You're able to still be helpful.
I love it. Listeners, if you're out there, if you have advice, if you have questions, a practice you have for goal setting and reflection, let us know. We can't see you from StreamYard, so you have to send us a comment. And because I'm all advice. I mean, so it sounds like you have sort of a list of questions that help reflect. I do. I use the time when I'm in transit to do that. I'm not the kind of person who's going to clear 2 hours on my calendar. I won't. But one of my intentions that I said a while back was that when I had open space, I was actually going to use it to think and not like be on my phone. And that has worked for me. It's basically the only time I reflect: driving, on the train, on the plane, waiting for the plane. I have a sort of peripatetic career, waiting to pick up the kids, sitting in the car, waiting for practice to end. And so I like to look back at the year, and then I sort of divide it into a few different buckets, big on buckets. One is financial, money. How did I do this year? Was it enough? Right? Like, what worked, what didn't? The other is time, right? And was it too much? I think about this with my travel schedule, my client load. The third is like, did I show up? Was I good? That's a really tough measure. And of course, I'm very mean to myself about it, but how do I feel about what I did this year? And then the fourth is really about sort of work-life integration. because to me, I don't know about you, I can't separate personal and professional.
Mhm.
It just has been too thorny. I feel like I have to sort of look at them both.
Yeah, I find that, I still don't know whether I'm completely comfortable mixing the two.
Huh.
And sometimes I do wonder if I'm being authentic because I do find that I'm two different people sometimes, at work and at home. At home, just because I feel like there are just different lenses, I think, to who I am. And uh, but I do think that that's been an area where I feel like it would be really, would it be, I often wonder, would it be liberating if I was to be that same person, you know? And one thing that I will say, I love what you said about buckets because, and by the way, everything that you said is so great because I think that idea around what gets measured gets managed
Hmm.
is such a great point. Like
It's true.
I find even talking to somebody like you, I'm learning about, wow, maybe I should start thinking about being a little more specific because I'm so not that person. Whereas, like, for example, my wife is more specific. And I would say to her sometimes when she gets frazzled, I'd say, hey, maybe take a little bit of a page from my playbook, which is be a little bit like, maybe who cares about some things. And she's found that actually that helps a little bit. Again, not being completely different than who she
Oh,
is.
I'd love to be able to do that.
Right, it's a muscle that we don't really have comfortably, right? Like my planning muscle is not there, so it's like writing with the opposite hand.
Right.
But I love talking to you about that idea that, yes, if you're going to be anxious, for example, about finances. I mean, right now we're obviously thinking about raising a child. We have a 4-year-old daughter at home. Before she was born, there was this feeling of like, hey, we can always kind of like, bootstrap and figure out how to get through. But now we need to like have her really raise her well. That brings a lot of money. And so maybe I do need to be more planning. It would be
Well, I
irresponsible if I
mean,
wasn't.
all those commercials. I'm sorry, my cats are going crazy. I'm gonna let them out. Hold on.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, guys. If Taylor Swift has cats, so she made it cool. Oh my gosh. I have these 2 little kittens. Sorry.
Sorry.
So this is so silly. I have a whiteboard. And every month, it's like I can hold it.
Mm-hmm.
And every month, here's what I do. It's a calendar whiteboard. I put my 3 big goals sort of for the year that I'm working towards up top. I write them out.
Mm-hmm.
In the open space at the side, I write the big things that I'm working on that month, and then any like things I want to try to do that month. And then I fill out the calendar piece day to day.
Wow.
And
That's good.
and I mark it off. And there's something about so I'll show it to you.
Uh-huh.
It's I actually just started erasing it, so it's a little bit of a mess.
Mm-hmm.
But up top, I write like my big goals, and then I write here sort of what I want to accomplish for the month. And if I don't accomplish it that month, I'll rewrite it,
Mm-hmm.
and then I fill in my calendar. And I can't tell you why, but this works for me.
Okay. Yeah.
So
That's all that counts. That's all that matters, right?
That's what I do. And I like to take sort of what I've reflected on, especially financially,
Mm-hmm.
those numbers, and put that into a goal for the next year.
Mm.
Because you and I are self-employed, we have a little bit more flexibility than a lot of people,
Yeah.
but we also have no guaranteed paycheck.
Right. Do you find that setting financial goals is helpful for you, or or is it just the tracking is helpful for you? Like, how do you feel about, because I have a friend who's a coach, and she actually monitors like all her calls and has a whole pipeline, and will say, this predicted income and stuff like that. And I did that when I was in sales for like when I was selling products. I never really have done that for my own my own business, partly because I felt a little bit like it was too much pressure to kind of worry about that if it wasn't hitting the mark. But how has it worked for you?
It was pressure. Why? Because you would be angry at yourself that you weren't doing enough, or?
I guess I felt like there were a lot of variables that are out of my control.
Yeah. True.
As opposed to if I was selling somebody else's product or selling, it felt, here's what it is. So much of coaching, I think, is you're selling a person, you're selling myself basically in some ways, right? There's a chemistry that we're trying to build here. If it was around having enough prospects in the pipeline, that might make sense to me. But if it was around like, I need to hit this number, and I would almost worry about it because it would almost get in the way of me being who I am, basically. If that makes sense.
I have a good friend who's also has her own business, and she was a consultant at Bain. And so she's so organized, and everything is in a spreadsheet and everything is tracked. And like her CRM is better than Salesforce, right? It's like, I call this, but it's amazing. I couldn't be that way.
Yeah.
I'm not organized enough, but I'm pretty ruthless about my financial goal setting, and reflecting. So I look back, and I've actually been doing that this week. I do keep a spreadsheet of all my speaking engagements, and I have the ones that worked, and then the ones that just emailed me and it didn't work. Because I don't know if anyone has ever shared this. This was news for me. Even for the top speakers, your close rate between we are interested in having you come to speak at this conference, and here's the check and here's the contract. It's a percentage.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I would assume for some really famous speakers, this doesn't apply, but I think for a lot of like run of the mill, like professional, pretty highly regarded speakers, it's like 50%. It could be 30%.
Wow.
And so I know they never tell you that, do they?
Yeah, I didn't know that. I always assumed that, if you're being in the discussion about speaking, you're obviously going to be the person.
No.
Wow.
No. And I took it really personally. And then someone I know who's a really amazing speaker and famous was like, no, it's a close rate, man. It's like, you don't win everyone. You're just in the conversation. So that was really
a question
helpful
for you, because this is similar to my coaching too, because it's hard not to take it personally if you are up against two other coaches and you don't get selected. But is there anything that you can do differently, like when you think about goal setting, to increase that close rate? Have you found that there's any variables you could control? That's
my big goal. So I've actually hired someone to help me with that.
Great.
Because I do feel like my materials, it's funny because I'm a marketer and I don't feel my marketing materials are good enough. So, and I know I won't do it myself. So that's a huge goal for me, is to increase that close rate. Yeah, totally. And it's the same with whatever business you're in. If you're in sales for someone else, if you're in sales for yourself, right? I ran an agency for years.
Yes.
We would go on exponentially more pitches a year and exponentially more meetings a year than we would actually close business. And you're always looking to decrease the close rate friction, right? You're always looking to figure out how to do that. And it's this sort of magical mix. It's the quality of your work and your word of mouth. Obviously, that's so important, but it's your emails, it's your website, it's all the things, your social media, your YouTube, your LinkedIn.
Do they still care about like the reels for y'all speakers?
I think they do.
Okay. Even though a lot of it is virtual nowadays.
I'm still learning so much of this, to be honest. But yeah, I do think having a reel, the thing that I've been told over and over is just like, you have to make it, and same for any kind of user, you have to make it easy for people to make a decision.
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So say that that's your goal. Say that you had, 10 clients last year, and this year you want to have 15. Okay, great. So if you had 15 clients, that's a number, right?
Yeah.
That's a financial number. What do you have to do to get there? Well, that's when it's actually helpful to look back. So like I said, I've been looking back and looking at everyone who contacted me, how many of them actually closed, thinking, okay, what can I do next year? What can I do in January to communicate with them? And then really trying to set a target. And then doing that with basically a lot of the different areas of my business.
What do you do about, because one of the things that I think I have a tendency to do is I'll come up with new ideas upon, reading something or meeting new people and thinking like, oh, maybe I should try that as a new, goal or whatever. For instance, like you've written a book. How do you think about like writing your next book? Or is that something like, do you think about, I need to get my goals in one place right now and then stick to those? Or do you give yourself a little bit of leeway to say, hey, maybe in the second half, I might be like, hey, I want to start doing this type of thing?
I choose one big project at a time.
Mhm.
And so, because the hardest part to me about running your own business is that you're doing the work that you've been hired to do, but
Yeah.
you're also looking ahead to building the pipeline and doing work that's going to guarantee the future pipeline.
Yeah.
And so your brain is always in two places at once. And
Yeah.
that's really tiring, but it's what you have to do. And so for me, that's how I think about it, is like, oh my gosh, my kitten. If I'm spending 15 hours a week, 25 hours a week actually doing the work that I'm
Mhm.
contracted to do now,
Mhm.
how many hours a week do I need to be spending to do the work that's going to guarantee that I still have contracts in 6 months?
Exactly. Yeah, and so much of what I think we both have to do is building content, building that social proof, you know, uh, doing stuff that isn't paid for right at the moment, but it's going to build that
Yeah.
kind of proof later. That's a big thing that I've noticed for myself. Like I still don't have an assistant, so I'm and I'm super overwhelmed. But it is something that I'm definitely thinking about doing next year. And I think as an entrepreneur, solopreneur in particular, you start thinking about like, oh, maybe I just do it myself and I'll figure it out. But I'm recognizing there's a scale. You have to start being willing to start bringing
Spend
people
some
along with
money.
you.
If I had one piece of advice for you from knowing you, I think you definitely have to free yourself up so you have more space for the big ideas.
I do. I definitely do.
You
I was
no one's gonna be able to be creative and have big ideas when they're, like, mired down in everything.
I know. I heard this great Bradley Cooper has this movie Maestro coming
Oh,
out about
yeah.
Leonard Bernstein. I heard an interview with him with Howard Stern the other day, and he was talking about how like Star is Born, the movie he made before, took him 5 years to make,
Wow.
and this one took him 6 years to make, and like because he really learned how to conduct and learned how to do all these things. And they were talking about how like even somebody like that who has a lot of money, he's like, how do you? He's like he still worries about cash flow. And he was like, even my next project is going to be a 6-year project because he really believes in writing and directing these big things. So he actually like still auditions for commercials. And he's like, I still need to do, him and his mom actually auditioned for a T-Mobile commercial that I think was in the Super Bowl or whatever. But he's like, we didn't know we were going to get it. We literally are videotaping in our house. So it just made me think a lot about this idea that like, if you want to do big work, you still can find time to do those things, those small things, but it's possible to do both of them.
I love that's incredible.
Yeah, right?
I find that so inspiring. And
It
also
is.
just when people are honest about, like, I did that to pay the bills,
Exactly.
right? But I think what he's also saying is that the space to do things that you feel are great takes
Hmm.
time, but life doesn't stop just because you need to make space for that. And so
Exactly.
that's all of our challenges. All of us who have a side hustle, all of us who want create content, all of us who want to do big things,
Hmm.
we still have bills to pay. We have kids to get to practice. We got to show up every
Yeah, and
single
and
day.
the other thing that I think is really great about the big projects is like even that's not guaranteed. Like it's not
Mhm.
guaranteed that your big thing is gonna actually fly. But then you also say, well, we have one life to live. We want to contribute at that level, right? So I think it's almost like a lifelong journey of saying, how do I find time for the deep work and also the small stuff, but don't give up on it. Like that's one thing I think you have a great point about like having an assistant or for myself is I have not made time for the big stuff. And it can get deceptive because you're like, hey, at least I'm paying my bills. You know what I mean? And so, but then are you really actually building your future, contribution in the field? And that's something that now that you mentioned, I'm going to focus on that next year.
I honestly, I think this is true for you because I know you, but I think I mean, if you have resources,
Hmm.
it's a really important question to think about.
Yeah.
Am I being penny wise and pound foolish?
Hmm.
because, right, you have to invest and you have to grow.
Yeah.
And if you're doing it all, like you're just not stretching. You're not.
No.
And is that really what people pay you for?
That's right. And that's where, thought leadership is such an interesting craft to be in, because it really is taking the time to think, taking the time to really create, and that is a huge part of my vision. I just need to find a way to really craft, carve that time out for it.
What if you put a money amount? What if you put an hourly rate against it?
Oh, that's interesting.
Because I assume as a coach, you sort of know what every
Yeah.
hour is worth. Like, what if you were like, I'm going to give this percent pro bono back to me?
That's super interesting. Yeah, because I think another thing about the mentality of, I think a lot of self-employed people is once you're given the deal, like the contract, it's like you're ready to work. But until that comes, it's like, okay, do I just keep going to find more work? But this is the mentality that I'm trying to change, which is, no, this is actually a deal that I've made. I just need to make it to myself.
Yes.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
right. Right. Hold the time. I mean, right. Because you're always willing. I mean, the thing that I've learned also is that this fall I've actually been working as a marketing director in an organization, and I've been working, oh my gosh, some weeks 30 hours.
Wow.
And remembering what that feels like has been so instructive to me. I mean, I always like to do consulting because it keeps me real. It makes me know that what I say as a thought leader actually is grounded in reality because I'm in organizations. But it's also made me realize that meeting culture, just being tied to a traditional schedule, makes it very hard to carve time to
Yes.
think, both for your work and for yourself. So I have a lot of respect for people who hold down, sort of more traditional jobs and still take the time to grow and do those projects.
Definitely. Well, you're doing it,
I'm like ready to drop. But if that's you and you're thinking, and a lot of people ask me this, they're like, I really want to write a book just for me. I have a 9-to-5 job, but like, how do I make the time?
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to be intentional. That time is costing you something from somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing that you were able to do that while you were selling your company, you're speaking, you're doing, you got the podcast. I mean, wow.
I'm a workaholic.
Well, we're benefiting from it. So,
Well, thank you. Let me ask you one last question. Reflecting today, like, has something come into your mind as a goal that you want to think about for next year?
yeah, I mean, I think I've always had a book is on the horizon for myself. That's definitely there. I that's always an important goal. What I probably need to do is to I think what you said, that's an aha moment. I think is to start looking at that as a client by itself.
It's a client. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, because I really put that aside, and think of that as less important in some respects, because I can always get to it later. But time is all we have, and I think it's a great concept that I'm going to start putting into practice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you for that insight.
100%. Oh my gosh, I love this stuff. I could do this all day. I think that for me, my biggest goal in life is to go back to graduate school.
Really?
And yeah, 100%. And I don't know if that's a 10-year goal or a 15-year goal. It's definitely not a 1-year goal.
Wow.
But I try to keep that present in myself because it means a lot to me. And I want to sort of like build towards that.
Wow, amazing. You're like a continuous learner. That's what I love about you.
We all are.
Yeah, that's what we love, right? That's
what we love.
Connected.
Well, thanks, Nihar. Have a great day.
You too, Maura. Always great talking to you.
Bye.
Bye.